Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 276. Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team really do not want these depositions to be unsealed. They are fighting tooth and nail to have these depositions stay completely blocked, sealed, and out of the public view. It makes you wonder what exactly is in those depositions. What did Maxwell say while she was being asked questions under oath and deposed? If her legal team is fighting this hard to keep them out of the conversation, to keep them out of public view, I can only imagine how incriminating the stuff inside of that deposition must be. And a lot of the documents, Ghislaine Maxwell is going to fight the release. She is not going to want this stuff out there. It's one thing for us to have circumstantial evidence, right? It's one thing for us to hear it from a second party, etc., etc. It's a whole nother ball of wax to see it in her own words when she was being deposed under oath. That is a huge, huge blow to Ghislaine Maxwell and her attempt to try and wiggle off of this hook. We know that there is ample evidence to put her away for a very long time at this point. And that is only with the few charges that we see so far, right? That's not with a superseded indictment and more charges that are surely to follow. Even with just these charges, she's looking at least 35 years if convicted. And for somebody her age, that's basically a life sentence. That does not include, like I was just saying, new charges that are inevitable, in my opinion. There is no way that more charges don't come, and when those charges do come, they're going to be much more severe. Once you start talking about RICO, and you start talking about racketeering, and the minimums that you get for that, the amount of time that you have to do, the mandatory time, it starts to become a very disheartening prospect if you're staring that down the barrel, because it is almost no shot for you to beat a RICO case when they come down at you from all corners. When they use RICO the way they use it against the mafia or against drug kingpins or criminal enterprises, against people like Ghislaine Maxwell, there is zero chance she's ready to stand up to that and fight that. So I only can imagine what's going to occur when we start seeing other arrests and we see this case bloom. Our article tonight is from Reuters. The author is Jonathan Stemple, and the headline is, Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition material could spread like wildfire, threaten fair trial, lawyers say. And that's what they're basing their whole entire argument on, the fact that they don't believe she's going to be able to get a fair trial. Well, my response to that is, there's nowhere that she can go to get a fair trial at this point where people aren't going to be aware of at least the very basics of the case. So she's just going to have to roll the dice with whatever jury her team picks out and hope that she's able to convince at least one of them that they're, a shadow of a doubt that she committed these crimes. But I think it's a very long road for Ghislaine Maxwell at this point, folks. I don't think she has any tricks left up her sleeve here. Now, there's always the chance that she can try and, work for a plea deal where she gets less time than was originally planned and she serves up other people. But the question remains, who is juicy enough for her to serve up? Because we know that the head of the monster was her and Jeffrey Epstein, the people that were actually putting the plan into place. We're not talking about her handlers, right? Because nobody has even brought up any of that evidence yet. We're talking about the people directly related to the trafficking ring and doing the daily work. So that would make her and Jeffrey Epstein the bosses. Epstein's dead. She's left holding the hot potato. So who is she going to give up? I guess she could give up people like Prince Andrew or Donald Trump or Bill Clinton, because boy, oh boy, we know Bill Clinton and the Clintons have serious ties. I mean, the Daily Beast has a new article that came out today that we're going to discuss tomorrow that talks about how Ghislaine Maxwell how Hillary Clinton hired Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew to work for her at the State Department. The rot runs deep, folks. All of these people, all of these billionaires, all of these millionaires, all of these people that run in so-called polite society that were hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein are in serious, serious danger of their lives being changed dramatically, because the evidence is mounting. And if Ghislaine Maxwell wants any sort of leniency from the court, meaning instead of 45 years or 50 years, maybe 25 years, she's going to have to give up some names. If not, then all of these defenses that her and her legal team have been cooking up, all of these delay tactics, none of it will save her, because she is staring at serious, serious time as a resident at a facility that she does not want to be at, folks. Ghislaine Maxwell's chance of a fair trial on criminal charges she aided Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse of girls could be destroyed by substantial negative publicity if a deposition she gave 4 years ago were publicly released, her lawyers said. Again, I think the worm is out of the apple here. There's no putting it back in. People know already the gist of what was in that deposition. People already know the basics. It's now just putting a receipt to it, adding the documentation along with what we have heard. And while I know it is going to be absolutely damning, I don't think she should be able to wiggle out of this, because at the end of the day, she has nobody to blame but herself. If she wasn't abusing these girls with Jeffrey Epstein, if she wasn't running around like nobody's lives mattered but her and her disgusting rich friends, then she wouldn't be in this position and she wouldn't have to worry about it. But folks, here we are. The lawyers made the argument in a Thursday night filing asking the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan to reverse a lower court judge's order to unseal the deposition and other documents. And now we know that this is the documents that were kicked up to the appeals court by Preska, and in turn the appeals court said that they would hear the case and see what Maxwell's lawyers were talking about here. So we're still working our way through that, and we'll see what the appeals court eventually decides. Maxwell's deposition had been taken in April 2016 for a now settled civil defamation lawsuit against the British socialite, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scumbag, by Virginia Roberts, who said Epstein kept her as part of his trafficking operation with Maxwell's assistance. And we all know that by heart as of now, right? We've talked about it enough here and elsewhere, and you've read about it on your own. We know the depraved situation that Virginia was in, and we know the leadership role that Ghislaine Maxwell had within the operation and within the circle of abuse. So Ghislaine Maxwell was rightfully so sued by Virginia, and then this deposition occurred, and now this is the documentation that Preska says should be unsealed. As far as Preska is concerned, this stuff should be in the public's hands, and the public should have access to it. Now, of course, Maxwell's lawyers disagree, and that's why we find ourselves here with the appeals court getting ready to take a look. Lawyers for Maxwell said the unsealing order did not take into proper account their client's privacy interests or the promise of confidentiality she received before being deposed. If the unsealing order goes into effect, it will forever let the cat out of the bag, the lawyers said, warning that intimate, sensitive, and personal information about Maxwell might spread like wildfire across the internet. Well, sir, the cat is already out of the bag. The wildfire has already spread. In fact, there's so much wildfire, it looks like King's Landing after Circe blew up Baelor's sept. That's how much wildfire has spread already about Maxwell. There's no sense keeping this stuff private anymore. This is the kind of stuff that the public should be entitled to see, especially after all we have dealt with to get here. But mainly, this documentation should be provided so that the survivors can point to it and say, see, look, this is what we've been talking about. This is the stuff that we have said. We are telling the truth. They are lying. And for those of us who know and who have been following things, we know that that's the case. We know that these so-called elite have finally been caught red-handed. They have finally been caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And now they're panicking. They don't know what to do. So they're firing off all kinds of crazy narratives. You got Dershowitz, who's running around like a psychopath madman. Never mind the other people in the spotlight who have been forced to take a step back from life. And you got yourselves a perfect storm for the predators to become the prey. The lawyers also said an unsealing would cause irreversible and unconstitutional negative publicity and undermine the truth-seeking function of Maxwell's trial by leading witnesses to recast their memories of events from decades ago. Again, more political nonsense, more BS, not political nonsense, more legalese, more legal nonsense, just more BS from Maxwell's team. They know that none of this is going to stick, and they know that it's not going to undermine anything because the gist and the basics are already known. This is just going to put a stamp on things, right? This is just going to be the dot over the I and the T crossed. Maxwell, 58, has pleaded not guilty to helping Epstein recruit and eventually abuse 3 girls who prosecutors did not publicly name from 1994 to 1997, and to committing perjury by denying her involvement under oath. She was arrested on July 2nd in New Hampshire, where prosecutors said she was trying to evade capture, and is being held in a Brooklyn jail after a judge called her a flight risk. Maxwell's trial is scheduled for next July. And yeah, we've been over this as well. Of course she was a flight risk. She has a passport to France. They don't have an extradition treaty with America. So why would you let her even get close to getting out of the country? Or furthermore, once you had her, why would you even bother giving her bail? Only a psychopath would imagine giving her bail is a good idea. Epstein was found hanged at age 66 last August in a Manhattan jail cell while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Roberts has been one of Epstein's most visible accusers, and her lawyers have said the public has a right to see Maxwell's deposition, and right from Virginia herself. If Virginia is comfortable with the public seeing that deposition, and Virginia is comfortable with people reading about what occurred, then I don't see the problem here. At the end of the day, her feelings are the only feelings that should matter, not Maxwell's. We all know what Maxwell is, the monster Maxwell is. Sure, any constitutional rights must be respected, absolutely. But if a judge has already ruled that this should be in the public sphere, then my friends, this should be in the public sphere. And I really hope that the appeals court feels the same. Lawyers for Maxwell disagreed, saying her constitutional rights to remain silent and get a fair trial by an impartial jury outweigh any presumption of public access. I'm not a lawyer here. I don't really know the wrangling or how they can make that argument, how it's unconstitutional, but I think that that's an argument that will not go too far, because I think that the public knowledge in this case outshines the presumption that she won't have a constitutionally fair trial. Why would they presume that the jurors would not be fair? So it's definitely a kind of defense that I doubt is going to work with the judge. Maxwell would not be required to testify at her trial. A lawyer for Roberts did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Oral arguments are scheduled for September 22nd. So the arguments over the unsealing here are set for September 22nd at the appeals court. And I've already blocked the day off so I'll be home the whole day for this, and hopefully I'll be able to listen in on the proceedings. I don't know how that's going to work with the appeals court, but if it's possible, I will most certainly listen in and bring you a recap directly afterwards. Some documents from the defamation case were released last month. Maxwell's lawyers asked the appeals court for permission to seal more than 1,000 pages of additional materials, which include her deposition filed with the appeal. 1,000 pages, folks. Think about the damning stuff that is in those 1,000 pages by the way they're fighting to keep them sealed. I can only imagine what is inside of those pages, and I cannot wait to dig in. Maxwell is separately seeking to have prosecutors identify the 3 accusers in her indictment and challenging her confinement conditions at the Brooklyn jail, saying she is being treated worse than other pretrial inmates. And again, these are more tactics that I don't think are going to work, tactics that I expect from her and her legal team, no doubt about it. There is a certain expectation when you hire these high-profile lawyers, right? You expect them to journey down every single avenue. You want them to explore every single route. You want to make sure they get to the top of that mountain. So, yeah, I expect them to do all sorts of stuff like this. Whatever they can find in their playbook and in their toolbox, they will utilize. But so far, the prosecutors have met them at every turn, and they have done a good job since Maxwell has been arrested. There's nobody who's been more critical of the prosecutors than me. But when you got to give credit, you give it. And I think they deserve a little bit of credit for what they have done since the Maxwell arrest. Up until that, it was straight garbage. But since the Maxwell arrest, the prosecutors have done a pretty solid job here, and I expect them to continue to counter the moves made by Maxwell and her high-profile team. As for the ruling and for what's coming next, we'll stay on top of it, and we will be here on September 22nd like we are every other day, and we will let you know and cover just exactly what occurs when the appeals court digs in and takes a look. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, we'll be back tomorrow.